James Carter never expected his late-night hobby would change everything. Working as a janitor in Manhattan's most exclusive office building, he'd seen her face dozens of times in passing. Those piercing green eyes and elegant features burned into his memory. When his 8-year-old daughter Maya convinced him to post his sketch online, neither of them knew that by morning, 27 million people would be staring at the same face, a face belonging to tech billionaire Sophia. Reynolds. Now she's standing at his apartment door, demanding to know how a man she's never met could capture her soul on paper so perfectly. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The fluorescent lights in the Meridian Tower cast harsh shadows across the marble floors as James Carter pushed his cleaning cart down the 40th floor hallway. At 34, his hands bore the calluses of honest work, his uniform pressed despite its age, his movements efficient from 3 years of the same routine. The building housed some of New York's most powerful corporations, their glass offices gleaming even at midnight when James began his shift. He'd learned to move like a ghost through these corridors, invisible to the few executives who worked late, unnoticed by the security cameras that tracked every corner. His world existed in the spaces between theirs, in the quiet moments when ambition slept and only the hum of air conditioning filled the silence. James preferred it this way. After his wife Sarah's death 2 years ago, solitude had become his companion, broken only by the hours he spent with Maya, his daughter who carried her mother's laugh, and his own stubborn streak. The executive floor held a particular fascination for James, not because of the expensive art or panoramic city views, but because of the people who inhabited this rarefied air. Their faces told stories, he believed, narratives written in the lines around their eyes, the set of their shoulders, the way they held their heads when they thought no one was watching. James had always seen details others missed, a gift that had once earned him a partial scholarship to art school before life derailed those dreams. Tonight, as he cleaned the conference room where Reynolds Tech held their weekly strategy meetings, James found himself thinking about her again. Sophia Reynolds, the company's founder and CEO, had built a tech empire worth $47 billion before her 32nd birthday. Forbes called her the most influential woman in Silicon Valley. The Wall Street Journal dubbed her the female Steve Jobs. But James knew her differently, through stolen glances and overheard conversations, through the way she stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows staring at the city below, her reflection ghost-like against the glass. She arrived early most mornings, often before sunrise, her heels clicking against the marble in a rhythm James had memorized. Sometimes she worked until well past midnight, her office light the only one burning on the entire floor. He'd seen her laugh during video calls with her team in California, watched her pace while dictating emails to her assistant, observed the way she rubbed her temples when quarterly reports didn't meet expectations. To the world, Sophia Reynolds was untouchable, a goddess of technology and innovation. To James, she was human, and that humanity called to something deep within him. The cleaning cart's squeaky wheel echoed through the empty hallway as James made his way to the service elevator. His shift would end in an hour, giving him just enough time to return to his studio apartment in Queens before Maya woke for school. Their morning routine was sacred, pancakes shaped like animals, braided hair that took 3 attempts to get right, backpack checks and lunch money counted twice. These moments anchored James to purpose, reminding him that some things mattered more than artistic dreams deferred. But tonight felt different. The sketch pad hidden beneath cleaning supplies in his cart seemed to pulse with potential energy. James had been drawing since childhood, filling notebooks with faces and landscapes, character studies and architectural details. His talent had once seemed like a pathway to something greater, but practical needs had steered him towards steady work, reliable paychecks, benefits that covered Maya's medical insurance. Art had become a private pleasure, something he pursued in the quiet hours between work and fatherhood. The apartment he shared with Maya occupied the 3rd floor of a converted brownstone, its windows facing an alley where cats gathered near the dumpster each evening. The space was small but clean, decorated with Maya's artwork and photographs of Sarah that James couldn't bring himself to put away. His easel stood in the corner near the window, surrounded by canvases in various stages of completion, most depicting the people who moved through his professional world like players on a stage he could never join. Maya was asleep when he arrived home, her dark hair spread across the pillow, her breathing soft and even. James stood in her doorway for a moment, grateful for this peace, this evidence that some things remained untouched by the chaos that had claimed so much of their life. He kissed her forehead gently, inhaling the scent of strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence, then retreated to his corner of the living room where Art waited like an old friend. The sketch pad opened to a fresh page, and James found his hand moving before his mind had consciously decided to draw. Sophia Reynolds's face emerged from the paper, as if it had always been there, waiting for him to discover it. Her eyes held depths he'd observed but never fully understood, intelligence tempered by something that might have been loneliness. Her mouth, often set in determined lines during board meetings, softened in his rendering, revealing vulnerability she never showed the world. Hours passed unnoticed as James worked, adding shadows that suggested secrets, highlights that captured the fire he'd seen when she defended her vision to skeptical investors. This wasn't the Sophia Reynolds of magazine covers and conference speeches, but the woman he'd glimpsed in unguarded moments, the human being who existed beneath the armor of success. His pencil found truths that cameras had never captured, emotions that press interviews had never revealed. Dawn was breaking over Queens when James finally set down his pencil, his hand cramped from the intensity of creation. The portrait stared back at him with such lifelike presence that he half expected her to speak, to step from the paper into his modest living room. He'd drawn hundreds of faces over the years, but none had emerged with such completeness, such undeniable life. This felt different, significant in ways he couldn't articulate. Maya's alarm clock chirped from her bedroom, followed by the sound of small feet hitting the floor. Their morning routine began as always, pancakes shaped like butterflies today, orange juice poured into her favorite glass decorated with dancing pandas. But Maya noticed the sketchpad immediately, her 8-year-old eyes bright with curiosity that reminded James achingly of Sarah. "Daddy, who is she?" Maya asked, studying the portrait with the serious attention she reserved for things that truly mattered to her. "She's beautiful, but she looks sad too, like she's thinking about something important." James marveled at his daughter's perception, the way she could see beyond surface appearances to emotional truth. "She's someone I see at work sometimes, just a face that caught my attention." "Can I see your other drawings?" Maya had been asking this question for months, her interest in her father's art growing as she developed her own creative abilities. James had always deflected, claiming his work wasn't good enough to share, but something about this morning felt different, as if the completion of Sophia's portrait had shifted something fundamental in his relationship with Alzand, his own talent. He brought the sketch pad to the breakfast table, watching Maya's expressions change as she flipped through pages of faces, each one capturing a moment in time, a glimpse of humanity frozen in graphite and paper. There were security guards caught laughing at shared jokes, executives frozen in moments of concentration, cleaning staff portrayed with the dignity that others rarely saw in their work. "Daddy, these are amazing!" Maya's voice held genuine awe, and James felt something unlock in his chest, a door that had been closed since Sarah's death opening to let light in again. "You're like, really, really good at this. Better than anyone I know." "Thank you, sweetheart. That means everything coming from you. You should put them on the internet," Maya declared with the confidence that only children possess about the solutions to adult problems. "My teacher says if you put art online, millions of people can see it. Maybe someone would want to buy your drawings." James had considered this possibility many times, but fear had always won over ambition. What if people didn't respond to his work? What if his art, so precious and personal, was met with indifference or criticism? The vulnerability required to share creative work felt impossible when he could barely manage the emotional demands of daily survival. But Maya was looking at him with such hope, such belief in his abilities, that refusal seemed like betrayal. "I don't know how to do that, Maya. I'm not very good with computers." "I can help." She was already reaching for his phone, her fingers moving with the digital nativity of her generation. "We'll make an account on Instagram. That's where everyone puts pictures now." The next hour passed in a blur of account creation and photograph uploading. Maya's enthusiasm infectious as she coached her father through the mysteries of hashtags and captions. She insisted they start with the portrait of Sophia, claiming it was the most beautiful one and would definitely get lots of likes. James felt his stomach tighten with anxiety as they prepared to share something so personal with the vast unknown audience of the internet. "What should we write about it?" Maya asked, her thumb hovering over the caption field. James considered this, thinking about the hours he'd spent observing Sophia Reynolds from a distance, the way her image had emerged from paper as if guided by forces beyond his understanding. Maybe just portrait of a stranger. Sometimes you see someone and feel like you know their story. Maya typed carefully, her tongue poking out in concentration, then added several hashtags she claimed would help people find the picture. With a final excited squeal, she hit the share button, and James felt his heart skip as the portrait disappeared into the digital ether, carrying with it a piece of his soul he wasn't sure he was ready to release. The school bus arrived 10 minutes later, and Maya bounded aboard with her usual energy, calling back to remind James to check their account throughout the day. He waved goodbye from their apartment window, watching the yellow vehicle disappear around the corner, then prepared for work with a strange mixture of anticipation and dread churning in his stomach. The day shift at Meridian Tower required different skills than his usual nighttime routine. James found himself working alongside other maintenance staff, their conversations flowing around sports scores and weekend plans, while he struggled to focus on mundane tasks. His phone felt heavy in his pocket, tempting him with its promise of notifications, but professional pride kept him from checking it during work hours. Lunch break arrived with agonizing slowness, and James retreated to the loading dock where smoking was prohibited, but solitude was possible. His hands shook slightly as he opened the Instagram app, and his breath caught at the number displayed beside a red heart icon. 47 likes in 4 hours felt impossible, more engagement than he'd dared hope for even in his most optimistic projections. The comments were even more surprising, a mixture of praise for his artistic skill and speculation about the identity of his subject. Several people had tagged friends, asking if they recognized the woman in the portrait. One user had written, "This looks so much like someone famous, but I can't place her." Another had commented, "The eyes are incredible, like she's looking right into your soul." James felt a flush of pride mixed with terror at this public validation of his work, the strange intimacy of strangers responding to something he'd created in the solitude of his living room. Art had always been personal for him, a private dialogue between observation and expression, but this felt like the beginning of a larger conversation, one he wasn't sure he was prepared to have. The afternoon passed in a haze of distraction, James's usual efficiency hampered by constant thoughts of his phone, the growing numbers that represented people around the world looking at his portrait of Sophia Reynolds. By 5 o'clock, the likes had climbed to over 300, and the comments section had become a forum for artistic appreciation and identity speculation that made his head spin. Maya was waiting when he arrived home, her face glowing with excitement that she'd barely contained throughout the school day. "Daddy, did you check? Did lots of people see it?" James showed her the numbers, watching her eyes widen with delight at the evidence of her father's talent reaching beyond their small world. They spent the evening monitoring the account together, Maya reading comments aloud while James tried to process the surreal experience of strangers discussing his work with genuine enthusiasm. "Someone thinks she looks like a movie star," Maya reported, scrolling through the latest responses. "And this person says you should sell prints." "What are prints, Daddy?" "Copies of the original drawing, made on special paper so other people can have them too." James was beginning to understand that this moment represented a crossroads, a decision point that could lead either back to the safety of obscurity or forward into unknown territory where his art might find a larger audience. Sleep came fitfully that night. James's dreams filled with faces from his sketchpad coming to life, walking off the pages to populate a world where his art mattered, where the stories he captured in graphite and paper could touch lives beyond his own. He woke several times to check his phone, watching the numbers climb with a mixture of exhilaration and panic that left him exhausted by morning. Maya's excitement at breakfast was infectious, her chatter about Daddy's famous picture making him feel simultaneously proud and terrified. The likes had surpassed 1,000 overnight, and the comments had evolved from simple appreciation to serious discussion about artistic technique and the mysterious identity of the portrait's subject. The day shift at Meridian Tower felt different now, charged with the knowledge that thousands of people were viewing his art while he pushed a mop across marble floors. James found himself studying the faces of executives more intently, wondering if any of them had seen his Instagram account, if they would recognize their janitor as the artist behind the portrait that was somehow capturing attention far beyond anything he'd imagined possible. Sophia Reynolds arrived at her usual time, her presence more intense now that James knew her image was spreading across social media platforms like ripples in a digital pond. She moved through the lobby with characteristic purpose, her heels clicking against marble in the rhythm he'd memorized, but today he noticed something different in her posture, a tension that hadn't been there before. The morning cleaning routine carried James to the 40th floor, where Reynolds' Tech's offices hummed with the controlled energy of empire building. Through glass walls, he could see Sophia in her corner office, standing at the window with her phone pressed to her ear, her free hand gesturing in the animated way he'd observed during particularly intense conversations. Lunch break brought another surge in the portrait's popularity, the numbers climbing past 5,000 likes with no signs of slowing. James felt overwhelmed by the scope of this attention. The way a simple drawing created in his living room had somehow resonated with people across the globe. Comments were pouring in from different countries, languages he couldn't read but whose enthusiasm needed no translation. "Holy shit, this is Sophia Reynolds." The comment appeared while James was scrolling, and he felt his blood turn to ice water in his veins. Within minutes, other users were confirming the identification, sharing links to news articles and corporate headshots that left no doubt about the portrait's subject. James stared at his phone in growing horror as the comments section exploded with recognition, speculation, and increasingly intense scrutiny. Someone had shared a link to a recent Forbes article featuring Sophia's photograph, the resemblance to his portrait undeniable. Another user had posted a side-by-side comparison that made James's stomach clench with anxiety about legal implications he'd never considered. The likes were climbing exponentially now, the share count growing faster than James could refresh the page. His portrait of Sophia Reynolds was going viral in real time, and he felt like a passenger in a vehicle careening out of control down a mountainside. The intimate drawing he'd created in solitude was becoming a phenomenon, discussed and analyzed by strangers who had no understanding of the quiet observation and artistic instinct that had brought it to life. Maya found him sitting at their kitchen table that evening, staring at his phone with an expression of shock that worried her immediately. "Daddy, what's wrong? Isn't it good that so many people like your drawing?" "It's complicated, sweetheart." James tried to find words that would explain his situation without frightening her. "The lady in the portrait is very famous, and I drew her without asking permission. Some people might think that was wrong of me." "But you didn't hurt anybody," Maya said with the clear moral reasoning of childhood. "You made something beautiful." "That's always good." James wished he could see the situation through his daughter's eyes, uncomplicated by adult fears of lawsuits and professional consequences. The portrait now had over 50,000 likes, and the comments had evolved from artistic appreciation to detailed discussion of Sophia Reynolds' business empire, her personal life, and speculation about how a janitor had managed to capture her likeness with such precision. Sleep was impossible that night, James pacing their small apartment while monitoring the viral explosion of his art. By midnight, the likes had surpassed 100,000, and major social media accounts were sharing the portrait with their millions of followers. He'd created something that had taken out a life of its own, spreading beyond his control or understanding. Morning brought the terrible realization that his quiet life was about to change forever. The portrait had accumulated over 500,000 likes overnight, and news outlets were beginning to pick up the story. James found articles with headlines like, "Mysterious portrait of tech billionaire goes viral," and "Unknown artist captures Sophia Reynolds in stunning detail," each one bringing his situation closer to the attention of the woman herself. Maya was getting ready for school when the first news van appeared outside their building, its satellite dish and crew equipment transforming their quiet street into a media circus. James watched from their window as reporters set up cameras and prepared for live broadcasts about the viral portrait and its mysterious creator. "Daddy, why are those people here?" Maya's voice held more curiosity than concern, but James felt panic rising in his throat at the speed with which his private life was becoming public spectacle. "They want to talk about the drawing, sweetheart. About how it became so popular." James was already calculating escape routes, ways to get Maya to school without exposing her to the media attention that was building outside their door. The back entrance to their building provided temporary refuge, allowing them to slip out unnoticed while reporters waited at the front. James walked Maya to school by a circuitous route, his head down and baseball cap pulled low, trying to process how drawing a portrait in his living room had led to hiding from news cameras like a fugitive. Work offered no sanctuary, the Meridian Tower lobby buzzing with unusual activity as journalists and curious onlookers gathered outside, hoping for glimpses of either the building's famous tenant or the janitor whose art had captured the world's attention. James used service entrances and freight elevators to avoid the chaos, but he could feel the weight of scrutiny pressing against the walls of his anonymity. The 40th floor felt different now, charged with the knowledge that his secret hobby had become global news. Through glass walls, James could see Reynolds' tech employees huddled around computer screens, no doubt discussing the viral portrait and its implications for their CEO's privacy. Sophia herself was nowhere to be seen, her usual morning arrival conspicuously absent. James was emptying wastebaskets in the conference room when his phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered, immediately regretting the decision when a reporter's voice demanded quotes about his artistic inspiration and relationship with Sophia Reynolds. "I don't have any relationship with her," James said, hanging up before the conversation could continue. But the calls kept coming throughout the day, reporters and producers offering money for interviews, art dealers proposing representation, curiosity seekers trying to solve the mystery of how a janitor had captured a billionaire's essence so perfectly. By afternoon, the portrait had accumulated over 2 million likes, and James felt like he was drowning in the attention. News articles were analyzing his technique, discussing the ethics of drawing someone without consent, speculating about hidden connections between artist and subject. His quiet life was being dissected by strangers who had no understanding of the simple circumstances that had led to this moment. The day shift ended with James sneaking out through a service tunnel that connected Meridian Tower to the subway system, a route he discovered during his first week of employment. The media circus outside the building had grown larger, news vans from major networks joining the smaller local stations that had started the coverage. Maya was waiting at their kitchen table when he arrived home. Her homework spread across the surface, alongside printouts of news articles about the viral portrait. Her expression mixed excitement with concern, the 8-year-old mind struggling to process her father's sudden fame and the complications it had brought to their quiet life. "The kids at school saw you on TV," she reported, her voice carefully neutral in the way children use when trying not to upset adults. "My teacher asked if you were really my daddy, the one who drew the famous picture." James sat beside her, putting his arm around her shoulders and breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo, a familiar comfort in a world that had suddenly become strange and unpredictable. "I'm still your daddy, Maya." Nothing about that has changed, no matter what people on TV might say. The portrait had reached 10 million likes by evening, a number so large that James could barely comprehend its implications. His phone rang constantly with calls from unknown numbers, forcing him to turn off the device entirely to preserve some semblance of peace in their apartment. Outside, more news vans had arrived, turning their quiet street into a temporary media village that showed no signs of dispersing. Dinner was interrupted by a knock at their door, authoritative and persistent in a way that made James's stomach clench with anxiety. Through the peephole, he could see a woman in an expensive suit, her posture commanding even in the hallway's harsh fluorescent lighting. "Mr. Carter?" The voice carried the confidence of someone accustomed to being heard and obeyed. "My name is Patricia Wells, and I represent Sophia Reynolds. She would like to speak with you about the portrait." James felt his knees weaken at this confirmation of his worst fears. The woman he'd drawn from observation and memory, the billionaire whose privacy he'd inadvertently invaded, was now seeking him out through expensive lawyers who knew his name and address. "Daddy, who is it?" Maya appeared beside him, her curiosity overriding any sense of caution that the situation might have warranted. "It's about the drawing, sweetheart. Someone wants to talk about it." James opened the door slowly, his heart hammering against his ribs as he prepared to face consequences he'd never imagined when he'd first put pencil to paper. Patricia Wells stepped into their modest apartment with the assessing gaze of someone who evaluated everything in terms of strategic advantage or potential threat. Her eyes moved from the easel in the corner to the sketch pads stacked on a nearby shelf, taking inventory of James's artistic life with professional efficiency. "Ms. Reynolds has seen the portrait," she began without preamble, her tone neutral in a way that revealed nothing about her client's intentions. "She's quite interested in meeting the artist who captured her so accurately." James felt a mixture of relief and terror at this unexpected development. He'd prepared himself for cease and desist orders, lawsuits about invasion of privacy, legal consequences that could destroy the small stability he'd built for Maya's sake. A request for a meeting suggested possibilities he didn't dare hope for. "She wants to meet my daddy?" Maya stepped forward with the boldness that children display when adults have failed to properly intimidate them. "Is she really as pretty as in the drawing?" Patricia's professional demeanor softened slightly at this innocent question, her mouth corking in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "She's very beautiful, and very interested in understanding how someone could know her face so well without ever having been formally introduced." The meeting was scheduled for the following evening at 7 o'clock, Patricia explaining that Sophia preferred to handle personal matters outside normal business hours, when media attention was more manageable. James spent the intervening time in a state of nervous preparation, cleaning their already spotless apartment and rehearsing explanations for his artistic process that might satisfy a billionaire's curiosity without revealing the depth of his unauthorized observation. Maya helped him select clothes for the meeting, choosing his best button-down shirt and the tie he'd worn to Sarah's funeral, the only formal occasions in his recent memory that had required such attention to appearance. Her excitement about meeting a real billionaire helped distract James from the magnitude of what was about to occur, the collision between his humble world and Sophia Reynolds's realm of power and influence. The appointed hour arrived with a promptness that somehow felt ominous. 3 soft knocks at their door that carried more authority than Patricia's previous visit. James opened it to find Sophia Reynolds herself standing in his hallway, her presence so much more intense in person that he momentarily forgot how to breathe. She was smaller than he'd expected, but more commanding, her green eyes holding the intelligence and determination he'd tried to capture in his portrait. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple style that emphasized the elegant bone structure of her face, and she wore jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than James earned in a month, but looked effortlessly casual. On her frame, "Mr. Carter?" Her voice held the slight rasp he'd noticed during overheard phone conversations, a quality that humanized her despite the obvious gulf between their stations in life. "I hope you don't mind me coming personally. I find that certain conversations require face-to-face communication. Please, come in." James stepped aside, but acutely aware of their apartment's modest furnishings and the vast difference between her daily environment and his own. "This is my daughter Maya. Maya, this is Ms. Reynolds." Maya stepped forward with the confidence that had been growing throughout the day, her 8-year-old eyes bright with curiosity as she studied the woman whose portrait had made her father famous overnight. "You're even prettier in person," she declared, with the honesty that adults had learned to temper with social convention. "Daddy drew you perfectly." Sophia's laugh was genuine, transforming her face from boardroom authority to something warmer and more approachable. "Thank you, Maya. Your father has extraordinary talent. I'm hoping he can help me understand how he managed to see me so clearly." They settled in the living room, Sophia choosing the worn armchair that had been Sarah's favorite reading spot, while James and Maya shared the couch. The billionaire's presence filled their small space with an energy that seemed to make the very air more charged, more significant than their usual quiet evening routine. "I have to admit," Sophia began, her gaze moving to the easel in the corner where James's latest work waited beneath a protective cloth. When Patricia showed me the viral post, I was convinced someone had hacked my private photos and created a digital manipulation. The resemblance was so precise, so intimate, that I couldn't believe it was hand-drawn by someone I'd never met. James felt heat rise in his cheeks at her use of the word intimate, suddenly aware that his artistic observation might have crossed boundaries he hadn't consciously considered. "I work nights at Meridian Tower. I've seen you there, but always from a distance. I didn't think anyone would recognize the portrait when Maya convinced me to post it online. You work at my building?" Sophia's eyebrows rose in surprise, and James could see her mental gears turning as she processed this information. "How long have you been there?" 3 years. I clean the 40th floor most nights, around the time you're usually leaving." James felt exposed admitting to this knowledge of her schedule, as if his professional invisibility had been a form of privacy violation all along. Sophia was quiet for a moment, her green eyes studying his face with the same intensity he'd observed during her business dealings. When she spoke again, her voice carried a note of something that might have been vulnerability. "I pride myself on noticing details, on being aware of the people in my professional environment. How did I never see you?" "I think that was the point," Maya interjected with the wisdom that children sometimes possess about adult dynamics. "Daddy says invisible people see everything because nobody watches them back." The comment seemed to strike Sophia with unexpected force, her expression shifting from curiosity to something deeper and more complex. "That's very insightful, Maya. Your father has taught you to see the world clearly." The conversation continued for over an hour, ranging from James's artistic background to Sophia's unexpected appreciation for traditional media in a digital world. She studied his other sketches with the focused attention she brought to quarterly reports, commenting on his technique and the emotional depth he brought to casual observation. "You've captured something in these faces that most people never see," she said, examining a portrait of the building's elderly security guard caught in a moment of gentle laughter. "There's a humanity here that's rare in any medium, but especially remarkable in someone who's essentially self-taught." James felt a flush of pride at her professional assessment, the validation from someone whose opinion carried weight in worlds far beyond his own experience. "I've always been drawn to faces, to the stories people carry in their expressions when they think nobody's watching." "And what story did you see in my face?" The question was asked with casual curiosity, but James sensed deeper currents beneath Sophia's apparent nonchalance. He considered his answer carefully, aware that honesty might reveal more about his observations than was comfortable for either of them. Success, obviously. Intelligence. But also, something that looked like loneliness. The kind that comes from being responsible for too much, for too many people. Sophia was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on Maya's artwork decorating the refrigerator, rather than meeting James's eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a quality he'd never heard during her business conversations. "You see a great deal from your invisible position, Mr. Carter." The evening wound down with Sophia asking practical questions about his artistic goals, his financial situation, and his plans for handling the attention the viral portrait had brought to his work. James answered honestly about his lack of formal business experience, his focus on providing stability for Maya, and his uncertainty about navigating the art world as a single father with full-time employment obligations. "I have a proposition," Sophia said, as she prepared to leave, her business instincts reasserting themselves as the conversation moved toward concrete possibilities. "Reynolds Tech has been looking for ways to support local artists, to invest in authentic talent rather than manufactured celebrity. I'd like to commission a series of portraits, corporate executives and community leaders, work that would provide steady income while building your reputation in legitimate art circles." End quote. James felt his breath catch at this unexpected opportunity, the chance to earn money through art rather than despite it. "I don't have experience with formal commissions, Ms. Reynolds. I wouldn't know how to price my work or manage that kind of business relationship." "That's what assistants are for," she replied, with the confidence of someone for whom logistical problems had solutions that money could purchase. "Patricia will handle the contracts and payment schedules. You focus on the art." Maya had been listening to this exchange with growing excitement, her 8-year-old mind grasping the essential truth that her father's talent was being recognized and rewarded by someone with the power to change their circumstances. Does this mean Daddy won't have to clean floors anymore? Sophia's smile was gentle as she knelt to Maya's eye level, her billion-dollar empire temporarily secondary to connecting with the child's hopes for her father's future. It means your daddy will have choices he didn't have before. Good art deserves to be valued properly. After Sophia left, James and Maya sat in their quiet living room processing the surreal experience of having their small world intersect with such concentrated power and influence. The portrait that had started as a late-night sketch had become a bridge between two vastly different lives, and James felt both gratitude and trepidation about where that bridge might lead. The commission work began within a week, Patricia arriving with contracts that guaranteed more money than James had ever imagined earning through heart. The first subject was the CEO of a renewable energy company, a man whose passion for environmental sustainability showed in every line of his weathered face. James found himself working with new intensity, knowing that his art was being viewed not as hobby or curiosity, but as professional service worthy of significant compensation. The portrait session took place in the CEO's corner office, natural light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows as James sketched quickly, capturing the executive's animated gestures and focused energy. It was strange to work openly, his artistic process no longer hidden but acknowledged and valued by people who understood that observation and interpretation required skill worthy of respect. Sophia visited his apartment twice more over the following weeks, ostensibly to check on the commission work, but lingering for conversations that ranged far beyond business matters. She seemed genuinely interested in Maya's school projects and James's artistic development, asking questions about his techniques and influences with the curiosity of someone discovering a world previously unknown to her experience. "You know," she said during one of these visits, watching James add final details to a portrait of a nonprofit director whose life's work showed in the laugh lines around her eyes. "I've been thinking about what Maya said, about invisible people seeing everything. I wonder if success doesn't make people invisible too, in different ways." James looked up from his work, considering this perspective he'd never encountered. "How do you mean?" "When people see me, they see the company, the stock price, the quarterly projections. They respond to what I represent rather than who I am. It's a different kind of invisibility, but isolation, nonetheless." Her voice carried a wistfulness that reminded James of the expression he'd captured in his original portrait. The conversation was interrupted by Maya's return from school, her backpack hitting the floor with the distinctive thud that meant homework and after-school snacks were about to dominate their kitchen table. She greeted Sophia with the casual familiarity of a child who had adopted the billionaire as an honorary family member, showing off a math test marked with a gold star and chattering about playground politics with the assumption that adult concerns should pause for truly important matters. Sophia listened to Maya's stories with the same attention she brought to board meetings, asking follow-up questions about classroom dynamics and offering suggestions for dealing with difficult classmates that revealed both intelligence and genuine care for the 8-year-old's social development. James watched these interactions with growing amazement at how naturally two people from completely different worlds could connect over shared human experiences. The commission work expanded beyond James's wildest expectations, word of his talent spreading through professional networks that had previously existed far beyond his reach. Corporate executives, nonprofit leaders, and cultural figures began requesting portraits, each session providing not just income but insight into lives of purpose and achievement that inspired his own artistic growth. Maya started accompanying him to some sessions, her presence adding an element of warmth that seemed to help subjects relax into more natural expressions. She had inherited her father's eye for detail and her mother's social intelligence, often noticing things about people that informed James's artistic interpretation. The portrait sessions became collaborative experiences that strengthened their bond while building his professional reputation. 6 months after the viral portrait had transformed their lives, James found himself preparing for his first gallery showing, a group exhibition featuring emerging artists of exceptional promise at a prestigious prepared Manhattan gallery. Sophia had arranged the opportunity through her cultural connections, but the acceptance had been based on the merit of work that had evolved far beyond his original sketchpad observations. The opening night arrived with the kind of nervous energy James remembered from Maya's first school play. Anticipation mixed with terror at the prospect of public judgment. He stood before his bathroom mirror adjusting the tie Maya had helped him select, a deep blue that she claimed brought out his eyes, trying to reconcile his reflection with the idea of himself as a legitimate artist worthy of drawn gallery representation. Maya appeared in the doorway wearing her best dress, a burgundy velvet creation that Sarah had bought for special occasions and that now fit her 8-year-old frame perfectly. Her dark hair was braided with the precision that had taken James months to master, and her eyes sparkled with excitement that made his own nervousness seem manageable by comparison. "You look like a real artist, Daddy," she declared with the confidence that had sustained him through every challenge since Sarah's death. "Everyone's going to love your pictures." The gallery occupied a converted warehouse in Chelsea, its white walls and polished concrete floors creating the kind of minimalist environment that James had only seen in magazines. His 12 pieces were displayed along one wall, each professionally framed and lit with museum-quality precision that transformed his humble sketches into something that looked genuinely important. Sophia arrived early, moving through the space with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to evaluating investments in terms of long-term potential rather than immediate appeal. She paused before each of James's portraits, studying them with an intensity that reminded him of their first meeting, when she'd examined his work with the same focused attention she brought to quarterly reports. "These are remarkable, James," she said, her voice carrying genuine admiration as she studied the portrait of the nonprofit director whose passion for education showed in every line of her weathered hands. "You've managed to capture something essential about each person, something that goes far beyond surface appearance to reveal character." The opening reception began at 7 o'clock, the gallery filling with an eclectic mixture of art collectors, cultural journalists, and curious viewers drawn by the story of the janitor whose viral portrait had launched an unexpected career. James found himself moving through conversations with people who spoke knowledgeably about artistic technique and market trends, their vocabulary unfamiliar, but their appreciation for his work unmistakably genuine. Maya stayed close to his side throughout the evening, her presence grounding him when the attention became overwhelming. She answered questions about her father's artistic process with the authority of someone who had watched countless hours of creation, describing his patience and attention to detail with pride that made James's chest tight with emotion. "My daddy sees things other people miss," she explained to an art critic whose review could make or break emerging careers. "He draws people's real faces, not just what they look like on the outside." The critic, a stern woman whose reputation for harsh judgment preceded her through artistic circles, knelt to Maya's eye level with unexpected gentleness. "That's very insightful, young lady. What do you think makes your father's portraits special?" Maya considered this question with the seriousness she brought to all matters of importance, her gaze moving to the wall where James's work was displayed. "He draws people when they're being themselves, not when they're trying to look good for pictures. Like when Ms. Reynolds looks sad even though she's supposed to be happy because she's rich." The comment drew laughter from nearby listeners, but James noticed Sophia's expression shift slightly, a flicker of something vulnerable crossing her features before her professional composure reasserted itself. The observation was more accurate than Maya could have understood, touching on truths that James had captured without fully intending to reveal them. As the evening progressed, red dots appeared beside several of James's pieces, indicating sales that represented more money than he'd earned in entire years of night shift janitorial work. Each sale felt surreal, validation that his art could support their life in ways he'd never dared imagine possible when he'd first started sketching faces in his modest apartment. The gallery owner approached near the end of the reception, her expression carrying the kind of satisfaction that came from discovering commercially viable talent before the competition recognized its potential. "Mr. Carter, I'd like to discuss representation. Your work has generated more interest tonight than we've seen from an emerging artist in quite some time." James felt his world shift again, the same sensation he'd experienced when Maya first convinced him to post his art online. Professional representation meant legitimacy, access to collectors and exhibitions that could establish him permanently in art world circles, that had seemed impossibly distant just months before. "I'd need to discuss it with my daughter," he said, glancing at Maya, who was engaged in animated conversation with Sophia about the merits of different ice cream flavors. "We make important decisions together." The drive home passed in comfortable silence, Maya asleep in the passenger seat, while James processed the evening's events. His phone buzzed with messages from people who had attended the reception, collectors interested in commissioning work, journalists requesting interviews about his transition from janitorial work to professional artistry. Their apartment felt different when they returned, somehow smaller but also more precious. The space where his artistic journey had begun now serving as refuge from a world that wanted to claim and categorize his talent. James carried Maya to her bedroom, tucking her into the same bed where she'd encouraged him to share his art with the world, grateful for the child's wisdom that had launched this improbable transformation. Sophia called the next morning while James was preparing breakfast, her voice carrying excitement that sounded unusual coming from someone whose business achievements had made her blasé about most forms of success. "The Times wants to do a feature story about your work. Patricia thinks it could establish you nationally, beyond just New York art circles." James stirred pancake batter while considering this latest development, each opportunity bringing possibilities he struggled to fully comprehend. "I'm not sure I'm ready for that level of attention. Maya and I are still adjusting to everything that's already changed." "I understand the hesitation," Sophia replied, her tone shifting to something more personal than her usual business efficiency. "Success can be overwhelming when it arrives suddenly. But your talent deserves recognition, James. You have something rare that could touch people's lives in meaningful ways." The conversation was interrupted by Maya's appearance at the kitchen table, her hair tousled from sleep and her expression expectant as she waited for the animal-shaped pancakes that had become their morning tradition. James poured batter into butterfly shapes while continuing his phone conversation, multitasking between fatherhood and career decisions that would have seemed impossible just months before. "Maybe we could start smaller," he suggested, flipping pancakes while Maya watched with the critical eye of a connoisseur. "Local coverage first, then see how that feels before committing to national attention." The feature story appeared in the Metro section 2 weeks later, accompanied by photographs of James working in his apartment studio and quotes that captured both his artistic vision and his commitment to maintaining stability for Maya. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Gallery inquiries from across the country, mixed with commission requests from people who had connected with his approach to portraiture. Maya read the article aloud over breakfast, her voice filled with pride as she pronounced difficult words with careful attention to each syllable. "It says you're redefining contemporary portraiture through authentic observation and emotional honesty. What does that mean, Daddy?" James considered how to explain art criticism in terms an 8-year-old could understand, settling on the simplest truth he could offer. "It means I draw people the way they really are, and other people think that's important work." The commission requests evolved beyond individual portraits to include corporate projects that challenged James's artistic range, while providing financial security that allowed him to reduce his janitorial hours to part-time. He found himself painting executives for annual reports, capturing nonprofit leaders for fundraising materials, creating art that served practical purposes while maintaining the emotional authenticity that had first attracted attention to his work. Sophia became a regular presence in their lives, arriving for dinner invitations that Maya extended with the casual authority of a child who had decided the billionaire needed more family time in her schedule. These evenings revealed sides of Sophia that never appeared in business publications. Her curiosity about Maya's school projects and genuine interest in James's artistic development, creating bonds that transcended their original professional relationship. "You know," Sophia said during one of these dinners, helping Maya with math homework while James cleaned dishes, "I've been thinking about funding an arts education program, something that would identify and support talented young people who might not otherwise have access to professional training." James turned from the sink, recognizing the tone that meant Sophia was working through a business idea that had captured her imagination. "That sounds like an incredible opportunity for kids who have talent but not resources. I was hoping you might consider being involved," she continued, her attention still focused on Maya's worksheet, but her words clearly directed at James. Your story demonstrates what's possible when talent meets costs. Opportunity. You could help identify other artists whose potential is being limited by circumstance. The idea appealed to James on multiple levels, offering a way to use his unexpected success to create opportunities for others while building a more sustainable career than individual commission work could provide. They spent the evening discussing possibilities. Sophia's business acumen, combining with James's artistic perspective to create a program structure that could genuinely impact young Brel artists' lives. Maya listened to their planning with the intensity she brought to any adult conversation that might affect their family's future, occasionally offering suggestions that revealed her growing understanding of both art and philanthropy. Her comfort with Sophia had evolved into genuine affection, the kind of relationship that develops naturally between people who share fundamental values, despite vastly different backgrounds. The arts education program launched 6 months later, housed in a converted warehouse that provided studio space for 20 young artists, along with professional instruction and mentorship opportunities. James found himself dividing time between his own artistic practice and teaching responsibilities. That challenged him to articulate techniques he had developed through intuition and observation. His students ranged from teenagers aging out of foster care to young parents struggling to balance creative ambitions with survival responsibilities, each carrying stories that reminded James of his own journey from artistic dreams deferred to unexpected opportunity realized. Working with them reinforced his belief that talent existed in every community, waiting for recognition and support that could transform individual lives while enriching broader cultural conversation. Sophia visited the program regularly, her interactions with students revealing the same genuine interest she had shown in Maya's development. She listened to their stories with attention that went beyond charitable obligation, asking questions that demonstrated real understanding of the challenges facing young artists from disadvantaged backgrounds. "You've created something special here," she told James during one of these visits, watching a 17-year-old former gang member work on a portrait that captured both street wisdom and vulnerability in equal measure. "These kids are finding their voices in ways that will change how they see themselves and their possibilities." The program's success generated media attention that positioned James as an advocate for arts education rather than simply a curiosity whose viral portrait had launched an improbable career. Interviews focused on his teaching philosophy and commitment to identifying overlooked talent, establishing him as a voice for authentic artistic development rather than social media phenomenon. Maya, now 9 years old and increasingly sophisticated in her understanding of her father's work, began accompanying him to some program events, her natural empathy making her popular with students who found comfort in her uncomplicated acceptance of their diverse backgrounds and experiences. She had inherited James's eye for emotional detail, often noticing things about the young artists that informed his teaching approach. "That girl over there," Maya whispered during one afternoon session, indicating a 16-year-old whose fierce independence masked obvious loneliness. "She draws angry faces because she doesn't want people to see that she's sad. Like how you drew Ms. Reynolds looking sad even though she was trying to look strong." James marveled at his daughter's insight, the way she could identify emotional patterns that connected to his original artistic breakthrough. Her observation led to a breakthrough with the student in question, a conversation about using art to explore, rather than hide difficult emotions that transformed the girl's work and her relationship with the program. 2 years after the viral portrait had changed their lives, James found himself preparing for a solo exhibition at a gallery whose prestige had once seemed impossibly beyond his reach. The show would feature portraits from his commission work, alongside new pieces inspired by his teaching experience, a body of work that demonstrated his artistic evolution while maintaining the authentic observation that had first captured public attention. The opening reception felt different from his group exhibition debut, confidence replacing nervous energy, as James moved through conversations with collectors and critics who now knew his work and respected his artistic vision. Maya circulated through the crowd with practiced ease, her comfort in these environments reflecting how much their lives had changed while maintaining the essential bond that had sustained them through every challenge. Sophia arrived near the end of the reception, her presence creating the usual stir among guests who recognized her from business publications and technology conferences. But she moved directly to James's side, her attention focused on his new work rather than the social dynamics her appearance had generated among other attendees. "These are your strongest pieces yet," she said, studying a portrait of one of his students that captured both determination and uncertainty in the young woman's expression. "You found a way to show people's potential alongside their current reality. It's like seeing who they are and who they could become simultaneously." The comment struck James as particularly insightful, articulating something about his artistic approach that he had felt but never quite expressed in words. His portraits had always aimed to reveal character rather than simply record appearance. But his work with young artists had deepened his ability to see possibility alongside present circumstance. The exhibition was a critical and commercial success, establishing James permanently in art world circles that valued both technical skill and emotional authenticity. Sales from the show, combined with income from the arts program and ongoing commissions, provided financial security that allowed him to focus entirely on artistic work without the safety net of janitorial employment. Maya's 10th birthday party took place in their apartment, now expanded to include the neighboring unit that success had made affordable. The guest list reflected how much their social circle had evolved, young artists from the program mixing with gallery associates and family friends, while Sophia helped with party games and cake cutting with the natural ease of someone who had become genuinely integrated into their family structure. "Make a wish, sweetheart," James said as Maya prepared to blow out her candles, the moment feeling weighted with significance as he reflected on everything that had changed since her 8th birthday, when she had convinced him to share his art with the world and craft. Maya closed her eyes with theatrical concentration, then opened them with a grin that suggested her wish involved plans she wasn't ready to reveal. "I can't tell you what I wished for, but it's about all of us being happy together for a really long time." The evening wound down with guests gradually departing, leaving James, Maya, and Sophia to clean up while discussing the day's events and plans for the upcoming week. These domestic moments had become precious to James, evidence that success hadn't corrupted the simple pleasures that had sustained him through difficult years. "I have something to tell you both," Sophia said as they finished loading the dishwasher, her tone carrying nervousness that seemed unusual for someone who regularly addressed shareholders and board members. "I've been offered a position with a technology company in California, a chance to lead their artificial intelligence division." James felt his stomach drop at this unexpected news, the possibility of losing someone who had become central to their lives never having occurred to him despite the obvious differences in their circumstances. Maya's expression shifted from post-party contentment to immediate concern about what this development might mean for their unusual family dynamic. "Would you have to move away?" Maya asked with the direct approach she brought to all situations that threatened her sense of security. "It would mean relocating to San Francisco," Sophia replied, her gaze moving between James and Maya as if trying to gauge their reaction to this possibility. "But before I make any decisions, I wanted to discuss it with the people whose opinions matter most to me." The conversation continued late into the evening, exploring practical considerations and emotional implications of a choice that would affect all three of them in different ways. Sophia's career had reached a point where new challenges were necessary for continued growth, but the bonds she had formed with James and Maya had become integral to her personal happiness in ways she was still learning to understand. "What if we all went together?" Maya suggested, with the optimism that made complex problems seem solvable through simple solutions. "Daddy could teach art in California too, and I could go to a new school and make new friends." James felt his heart race at this possibility, the idea of such a dramatic change both terrifying and exhilarating. His life in New York had become comfortable and successful, but the prospect of new adventures with people he loved offered possibilities that mere professional achievement couldn't provide. "It's a big decision," he said, looking at Sophia, whose expression suggested she had been hoping for exactly this response. "We'd need to think about schools for Maya, finding space for the art program, making sure this is right for everyone involved." "I've already researched schools," Sophia admitted with a slight blush that revealed how much thought she had given to this possibility. "And there are incredible opportunities for arts education programs in the Bay Area, foundations that would support expansion of what you've built here." The discussion continued through several more conversations over the following weeks. Practical planning mixed with emotional exploration of what it might mean to build a life together across the country, from everything Gatra. Familiar. James found himself sketching constantly during this period. Portraits of Sophia and Maya that captured his evolving understanding of how much these relationships had come to mean to him. The decision crystallized during a quiet evening when Maya was working on homework while James and Sophia prepared dinner together. Their movements around the kitchen coordinated through months of shared meals and domestic collaboration. The moment felt simultaneously ordinary and profound, evidence of bonds that had grown beyond their original circumstances to become something resembling family. "I think we should do it," James said suddenly, his words surprising even himself with their certainty. "All of us, together. Whatever challenges we face will be easier to handle if we're facing them as a team." Maya looked up from her math worksheet with a grin that suggested she had been waiting for this conclusion throughout their deliberations. Sophia's smile was equally bright, relief and excitement combining in an expression that reminded James of the vulnerability he had first captured in his viral portrait 2 years earlier. The move to San Francisco took place 6 months later, a cross-country adventure that involved shipping canvases and art supplies alongside Maya's stuffed animals and the kitchen table where James had first decided to share his work with the world. Their new home was a converted Victorian in the Mission District, its high ceilings and natural light perfect for artistic work, while its garden provided space for Maya to explore new interests in botany and outdoor adventure. The West Coast Arts program launched with 25 students and expanded facilities that included digital media capabilities alongside traditional fine arts instruction. James found his teaching enriched by collaboration with Sophia's technology background. Their combined perspectives creating opportunities for young artists to explore creative expression through multiple mediums, while maintaining focus on authentic observation and emotional honesty. Maya adapted to her new school with characteristic resilience, her social intelligence helping her navigate different cultural backgrounds, while her artistic eye found inspiration in San Francisco's diverse neighborhoods and dramatic landscape. She began creating her own art with increasing sophistication, her work showing influences from both her father's portraiture and her own unique perspective on urban life. Sophia's new position challenged her professionally, while allowing more flexibility for family involvement than her previous role had permitted. She found unexpected satisfaction in helping with homework and attending school plays, domestic pleasures that balanced the intense demands of leading artificial intelligence development for a company positioned at the forefront of technological innovation. One evening, as James worked on a portrait of one of his new students, while Maya and Sophia collaborated on a science project at the kitchen table, he paused to appreciate the scene that had evolved from his decision to share a simple sketch with the world. The viral portrait that had started this journey hung framed in their living room, a reminder of how art could bridge impossible distances between different lives and create connections that transform everyone involved. "Daddy," Maya called from the table where she was constructing a model solar system with Sophia's engineering guidance. "Do you ever miss the old apartment?" James considered the question while adding final details to the portrait, thinking about their modest beginnings and the unexpected path that had led to this moment of domestic contentment 3,000 miles from where their story had begun. "I miss some things about it," he replied honestly. "But I'm grateful for everything that brought us here, to this life with the people we love." The portrait was completed near midnight, another face captured in graphite and paper, another story revealed through patient observation and artistic interpretation. James set down his pencil and stepped back to examine his work, thinking about the millions of people who had seen his art online without understanding the quiet domestic happiness that had made it all possible. Outside their Victorian windows, San Francisco glittered with the lights of ambition and innovation, a city where dreams were rebuilt daily by people willing to risk everything for the possibility of transformation. Inside, 3 people who had found each other through art and accident settled into evening routines that felt both ordinary and miraculous. Evidence that sometimes the most important changes began with the simplest decisions to share what mattered most. Maya's bedtime story that night was about artists and inventors who changed the world through patience and observation. Heroes who saw possibilities that others missed and had the courage to make those possibilities real. As James tucked her into her new bedroom, he reflected on how much truth existed in children's stories. How the most profound changes often began with someone willing to look carefully at the world around them and canned share what they discovered. The viral portrait had become a bridge between two vastly different lives, but the love that had grown from that connection was entirely their own creation, built through countless small moments of kindness and understanding that had nothing to do with fame or fortune. As James turned off Maya's light and joined Sophia in their shared bedroom, he felt grateful for the accident of observation that had led to this intentional family, this life that felt both earned and gifted in equal measure. Their story had begun with the janitor's sketch of a stranger, but it had become something far more significant, a testament to the power of art to reveal connection and create community in the most unexpected circumstances. Tomorrow would bring new portraits to create, new students to teach, new moments of domestic happiness to treasure, all of it growing from the simple decision to share authentic observation with a world hungry for grass. Genuine human connection. 5 years had passed since that life-changing Instagram post, and James found himself standing in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, surrounded by friends and colleagues who had gathered for the opening of his first major retrospective exhibition. The show, titled Invisible Observers: Portraits of Human Connection, featured 50 of his works spanning from that original viral sketch to his most recent pieces exploring the intersection of technology and human emotion. Maya, now 15 and taller than her father, moved through the crowd with the poise of someone who had grown up in art world circles, but retained the grounded perspective that James and Sophia had worked to maintain throughout their unconventional journey. She wore a dress she had designed herself, inspired by the patterns she observed in neural network visualizations from Sophia's artificial intelligence research. Her artistic eye, evolving to encompass both traditional observation and cutting-edge innovation. "Dad, look at this," Maya called, standing before a display case that contained his original sketchpad, open to the page where Sophia's portrait had first emerged. Museum visitors clustered around the artifact, reading the accompanying text that explained how a single drawing had launched not just an artistic career, but an entire educational movement that had now expanded to 12 cities across 3 states. James joined his daughter, still amazed by the trajectory that had brought them from a queen's apartment to this moment of institutional recognition. The sketch looked smaller than he remembered, more fragile, yet its power to capture attention remained undiminished even in this rarefied environment where masterpieces competed for viewer engagement. Sophia appeared beside them, her arm slipping naturally around James's waist in the gesture of partnership that had become second nature over their years together. Her role as Chief Innovation Officer at Quantum Dynamics had elevated her influence in technology circles, while her involvement in arts education had given her a platform for advocating the integration of creative thinking in STEM fields. The Times critic called it a watershed moment in contemporary portraiture. She whispered, nodding toward a distinguished woman who was studying the centerpiece of the exhibition, a massive canvas depicting their arts program students at work, each face capturing the concentration and hope that James had learned to recognize in young artists discovering their own potential. The retrospective had been 3 years in development, museum curators working with James to select pieces that demonstrated his artistic evolution, while maintaining thematic coherence around his central bow. Focus on authentic human observation. The exhibition included not just finished works, but also preparatory sketches, behind-the-scenes photographs of his teaching, and interactive displays that allowed visitors to understand his process of seeing beyond surface appearances to capture essential character. Dr. Catherine Williams, the museum's director of contemporary art, approached their small family group with the satisfaction of someone whose curatorial instincts had been validated by both critical acclaim and record-breaking attendance figures. "James, the response has exceeded our most optimistic projections. We've had visitors from 43 countries, and the educational programming tied to the exhibition has generated more interest than anything, we've done in recent memory." The international attention had surprised everyone involved, but particularly James, who continued to think of himself as someone who drew faces rather than created culturally significant art. Reviews in European publications had praised his ability to capture universal human experiences through individual portraits, while Asian critics had noted the influence of traditional observational sapper techniques on his contemporary approach. Maya had read these reviews aloud during their weekly family dinners, her pride in her father's achievements balanced by the teenager's natural tendency to keep successful parents properly humble. The guy from the London paper says you're redefining the relationship between observer and subject in an age of digital mediation, she had reported with theatrical seriousness before adding, which sounds super fancy for draws people good. The evening's formal program began with remarks from the museum director, followed by a panel discussion featuring James, two prominent art critics, and a neuroscientist who had studied the psychological impact of portraiture on both artist and viewer. James had initially resisted the academic analysis of his work, preferring the direct emotional connection that art could create without intellectual interpretation. But Sophia had convinced him that scholarly attention could amplify the reach of his educational advocacy. "What strikes me most about Mr. Carter's work," said Dr. Eleanor Rodriguez, the neuroscientist whose research focused on visual perception and emotional recognition, "is how it demonstrates the profound human need to be truly seen. His portraits don't just capture physical appearance, they reveal the subject's essential humanity in ways that create genuine empathy in viewers." The comment resonated with James's own understanding of why his art had connected with so many people. The hunger for authentic connection in an increasingly mediated world where most human interaction occurred through screens and carefully curated social media presentations. His portraits offered something that digital communication couldn't provide: direct emotional transmission between one human consciousness and another. During the question and answer period, a young art student asked about the role of invisibility in his artistic development, referencing the early years when his janitorial work had provided access to observation without recognition. James considered the question carefully, thinking about how his current visibility had both enhanced and complicated his ability to capture unguarded human moments. "Invisibility taught me to see without judgment," he replied, his voice carrying across the museum's lecture hall to an audience that included some of the most influential figures in contemporary art. "When people don't know they're being observed, they reveal aspects of themselves that disappear the moment they become conscious of an audience. My challenge now is to create that same sense of safety and authenticity, even when my subjects know they're posing for a portrait." The solution had evolved through his teaching work, where young artists learned to trust his intentions and allow vulnerability to surface during portrait sessions. James had developed techniques for creating emotional safety that enabled subjects to lower their defensive masks, resulting in portraits that captured the same unguarded humanity he had once observed from the shadows of office buildings. After the formal program, the reception continued in the museum's sculpture garden, where guests mingled among classical and contemporary pieces under a canopy of stars that reminded James of the nights when he had worked alone in Manhattan office buildings, sketching faces by fluorescent light while the city slept around him. A young woman approached him near the fountain, her nervous energy suggesting she had been gathering courage throughout the evening to initiate this conversation. "Mr. Carter, I'm Sarah Chen, one of your former students from the San Francisco program. I wanted to thank you for believing in my work when nobody else would." James remembered her immediately, a 17-year-old whose portraits of elderly residents in Chinatown had captured both cultural pride and immigrant resilience with remarkable sensitivity. "Sarah, how wonderful to see you. I heard about your fellowship at the Whitney. Your grandmother would be so proud." "She was the inspiration for everything," Sarah replied, her eyes bright with the tears that came when deep gratitude finally found expression. "But you taught me how to see her stories in ways that could touch other people's hearts. The techniques you shared about capturing dignity and wisdom in aged faces, they've become the foundation of all my work." These encounters had become increasingly common as James's former students achieved recognition in their own right, their successes creating ripple effects that extended the impact of the original arts education program, far beyond its physical locations. Maya often joked that her father was accumulating artistic grandchildren faster than most people collected social media followers, a network of creative descendants who carried his teaching forward into new contexts and communities. The evening concluded with James, Sophia, and Maya walking through the emptying galleries, their footsteps echoing in spaces where his life's work now resided alongside pieces by artists whose names had been legendary when he was still learning to hold a pencil properly. The surreal nature of this achievement hadn't diminished over the years, each milestone feeling simultaneously earned and miraculous. "Remember when you were afraid to post that first picture?" Maya asked, pausing before the original viral portrait that had started their journey. "You kept saying nobody would care about some drawing you made in our living room." James studied the piece that had transformed their lives, noticing details in the museum lighting that he had forgotten about his own work. Sophia's eyes still held the same depth that had captivated him during those late-night observations, but now he understood the loneliness he had captured, the isolation that success could create when achievement became a barrier to authentic human connection. "I was wrong about a lot of things back then," he admitted, putting his arms around both Maya and Sophia as they stood before the portrait that had brought them together. "I thought art was something you did alone, for yourself. I didn't understand that the most powerful creative work happens when you're brave enough to share what you see with people who need to feel less alone in the world." The retrospective would travel to museums in Los Angeles, Chicago, and London over the following 18 months, each venue adding programming that emphasized arts education and community engagement. James would accompany the exhibition, conducting workshops and master classes that continued his mission of identifying and nurturing overlooked artistic talent in communities that rarely received such institutional attention. But tonight, walking through the Metropolitan Museum with the two people who had made his success meaningful, James felt the quiet satisfaction that came from work completed with integrity and love, shared without reservation. The viral portrait had been an accident, but everything that followed had been built through deliberate choices to use unexpected opportunity in service of authentic connection and creative growth. Their taxi ride back to the hotel passed through Manhattan neighborhoods where James had once worked invisible night shifts, the city lights reflecting off windows he had cleaned while dreaming of artistic recognition that seemed, quote, impossibly distant. Now those same streets represented the foundation of a life that had exceeded every aspiration he had ever dared articulate, built from the simple decision to share honest observation with a world hungry for genuine human stories. Maya fell asleep against Sophia's shoulder during the ride, her teenage energy finally exhausted by an evening of adult conversation and emotional intensity. James watched his daughter's peaceful face, seeing in her features both Sarah's gentle spirit and his own stubborn determination, grateful for the unexpected family that art had created from the most improbable circumstances. Tomorrow they would return to San Francisco, to the Victorian house where domestic happiness continued alongside professional achievement, where Maya's artwork filled the refrigerator and Sophia's technology conferences alternated with school plays and parent-teacher meetings. The retrospective had been a career pinnacle, but home remained the center of their shared story, the place where love mattered more than recognition, and ordinary moments held more significance than extraordinary achievements.